Hi, this is Maggie from Crafts the Charm. Welcome to a 2-minute technique. Today's technique is casting on using a long tail cast on. Casting on is the process of putting stitches onto our needle so we can begin knitting. The long tail cast on is slightly less beginner friendly than the loop and knit cast on methods, but once you get the hang of it, it's quick and easy. To do this, you'll want knitting needles, yarn, and scissors. It might also be helpful to have a way to measure your length of yarn. To determine the size of knitting needles you'll need, look at the label on your skein of yarn. It will suggest needle sizes and the size swatch you should be able to knit with that size needle. Here I'm using 5.5mm needles. In the long tail cast on, you are going to leave a long tail that you use to create the stitches on your needle. One difficulty in the long tail cast on is knowing how long that tail should be. What I recommend is casting on some stitches, measuring how much yarn you used, and then using that ratio of inches or centimeters to stitches to figure out how much yarn you'll need for your project. To cast on, begin by measuring out the amount of yarn you'll need for your stitches, plus 4 to 6 inches extra for a tail that you'll weave in when you're done knitting. I suggest giving yourself a few extra inches as well. Make a slip knot by making a loop and then put the yarn through the loop, making another loop. Put that loop on your needle and pull tight. Hold the yarn and the tail together between your middle and ring fingers and pull down away from the needle a little bit. Now take your index finger and thumb and insert them between the yarn and the tail and stretch them apart. Now put the needle under the yarn that's between your thumb and middle finger. Lift it up and move toward the yarn that's over your index finger. Scoop that yarn up from above, then move your thumb over the needle, release the yarn on the thumb, and pull the stitch tight. Repeat this process until you've cast on the number of stitches you need for your project. You can now knit from this side. If you're doing a sample to estimate, measure the amount of yarn you used for the stitches. For example, I used 4 inches here to make 11 stitches. So my formula for how much yarn I need for n stitches is 4 times n divided by 11. Substitute the amount of yarn you used for 4 and the number of stitches you created for 11 and the number of stitches you need to create for n to determine the number of inches or centimeters you need for your project. Here are 3 swatches that I started with 3 different casting on techniques. This first swatch is the loop or single cast on, and the second swatch was started with a knit cast on. This final swatch was started with a long tail cast on and gives the strongest edge of the 3. There are 2-minute technique videos for all 3 casting on methods. Knitting is such a wonderful skill to have. I'm just a beginner, but already I've made sweaters, hats, Christmas stockings, and pillows and Christmas balls like you see here. The first step is getting the yarn onto the needle. Happy crafting!